Hello, and welcome to another episode of Unboxing Women, where we explore why women in business are often called such a bitch, with a focus on the music and entertainment industry. My name is Rexx, and with me is my friend Maika Rose, and we are both independent recording artists and singer-songwriters based in Europe. You can listen to us on our YouTube channel and on your favorite podcast platform. So today we have Matt with us, Matthew Parisi. Hi, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me on here. Hi.
Here's a little intro about Matt. So after becoming obsessed with music at the age of 14, he quickly became an assistant at a local recording studio, and this landed him the opportunity to work as the head engineer for Mike Stock, who is UK's most successful songwriter and producer, by the way. And now he has launched his own independent studio and works with singers and songwriters from around the world. So we kind of did this already, but I wasn't recording. So spoiler alert for the people listening. It's a bit weird for us, but hey, welcome to the pod, Matt.
Thank you. Tell
us a bit more about working with Mike and all the things leading up to now the launch of your own studio.
Yes. So Mike was great. That was a really interesting time. So I worked with him for coming up to 4 years. And that was a real baptism of fire, because previous to that, I'd been at BIM, Brighton Institute of Modern Music, and there I'd got to work in some local studios, just bringing kind of uni bands. And previous to that, I was about 14 when I'd first entered a studio, and that was this kind of basement in a theatre, and everything was stuck together with tape and hope and desperation, and somehow it worked. And the guy that ran it, he was great. He was a guy called Steve McDaniel. Shout out to his band Solstice. Real, like, just brilliant musicianship and a real nurturing kind of nature. And there's a lot of us kids around sort of learning how the studio works, and he was always putting these things together for younger musicians to come together and find a home outside of their home. So from there, I went to uni, and that experience enabled me to work in the studios in Brighton, because I kind of had an understanding of the software and knew how to plug things in. And that eventually, after studying, about 2 years after studying, I got an opportunity to go and meet Mike, initially to actually talk about helping him run his label. And then I didn't get that job, but I found out a little while later he was looking for an engineer, and I emailed him and just said, well, actually, that's what I do, probably better than the kind of business side of things. That's kind of where I'm at. So I came in and spoke to him. So I was actually coming up to a bit of a crisis moment. I was coming up to about 25, and I was saying to myself, right, if I'm not full-time in the music industry, by the time I'm 25, I'm quitting music and I'm going to go restudy. I'll do software engineering or something like that. Yeah, I was just fed up with it all, and I was working at that time for Legal Aid, which is like the UK's legal kind of thing. I was just on the desk. It was a part-time job, and I was just trying to get back into music, and so this thing came through, and it was about a week or so before my 25th birthday, and I messaged him, and he messaged back, and he said, why don't you come in on the 20th of March? We're doing a recording session then. Now the 20th of March is my birthday, so on my birthday I go up to his, and we'd already met before, so we were just chatting, and I took part in this recording session, and it was Nikki French, who was a Eurovision Song Contest contestant from years back for the UK, and so we did this, and this interview lasted forever. I was expecting to be there for about an hour or so, and it was getting to like 5-6 o'clock in the evening. I'm thinking, I'd like to spend a little bit of my birthday, celebrating it, especially 25 is meant to be a big-ish one, quarter century.
Yeah.
So we go to his office, or one of the offices, and we sit and we chat, and he says, do you think you can run this? And I'm looking at this studio going, there's stuff here, I don't even know what it does. I wouldn't even know how to switch it on. But full of bravado and confidence. I go, yeah, sure. Like, I think I could run this.
He said yes.
He said yes. Shook my hand, gave me the job that night, and 25th birthday, I got my full-time job in the music industry.
Oh my God, that's amazing. I just said he said yes because we have had talks before about women not going for it like you just said you did. So when women feel a little bit insecure about something or doing something, they will basically say, oh no, I wouldn't know where to start. But you just said, oh yeah, I can do this.
Yeah, absolutely. It's something I learned from my first job outside of university. So I was a headhunter in an industry I knew nothing about. I was a headhunter in the telecoms industry, and the reason I got that job was another kind of scenario where I was into my then girlfriend at the time. She was part of their admin team, and they needed a part-time person, just literally data entry stuff. So I'd come out of uni, I needed a job, and I said, yeah, okay, I'll do that. I was in there for about 3 weeks, and I was listening to what the headhunters were doing, and I thought, I'm going to chance my luck here. I went to the directors and I said, I want to be a headhunter.
I can do that.
I said, I want to be a headhunter.
Wow.
And so they ummed and ahed, and they said, yeah, okay. They gave me a desk and trained me up, and away I went. Now, I was rubbish at that. I was a rubbish headhunter. But one of the things, I didn't like it. It's not the industry for me. That's fine. But one of the things I learned through headhunting, which I always thought was interesting, we had, it was mostly, men doing the headhunting, but there are also, a few women. And I learned in that office, just because my then girlfriend was part of admin, the women were on a better basic wage than the men. And I thought that was really interesting because that's not the case generally.
No.
But I also learned in that job that when I was working with female candidates, they were less likely to negotiate. When I was working with male candidates, they didn't even think about negotiating. It's like that was part of the course. Of course they negotiated. Of course they were like, I want higher than that. I want better than that. I want better than that. Whereas, for the females, for the women, I had to be the one to say, right, let's negotiate for better. And what I'd learned as the reason that the women in our office, I mean, they're very much the outliers. This is very not the case in normal working situations. But the reason they were generally paid better was because, one, it's a really, really tough industry. I think as a female, you have to prove yourself 10 times more than a male to get into that kind of job. And so in doing so, the women that worked there had to have that kind of personality. It's like, no, I want more. No, I want more. No, I want more. No, I want more. So,
right.
We're really talking about outliers in the way that those women sort of conducted their business. But I always thought that was really interesting. And I thought what's even more interesting was picking up and even being told, as a general rule, women don't negotiate, so you have to make sure that you force them to, so that they get a better salary. Because obviously, the better salary they got, the better commission we got. So we always wanted them to have much higher packages, much higher salaries. So I always thought that was really interesting, and not the contributing factor, but I think a fairly major contributing factor in why potentially women are paid less for the same job roles that men are paid for. And it can be down to negotiating, and whether that's a characteristic or broad characteristic, or whether that's a something that's like a learnt behavior. I mean, who knows? I'm not a psychologist or an expert in this, but it was a very interesting early insight for me at a very basic level to that disparity between men and women in the workplace.
Yeah, I definitely think it's a taught thing. Yeah, I think it's that we're taught to just be happy with what we're given, basically, and not be annoying too much?
I think it's honestly, yes, but I also think it's the values that women and men are taught. Like, women are taught to value family, to value people, to value friendships, to value, connections with people. And I don't know if that is maybe also a biological thing. I have no idea. But, men are taught to value jobs, to value prestige, to value how people see you, and et cetera, et cetera. So I think based on how we are taught to value things, we go into negotiations differently.
That makes sense.
So basically, so a woman would go into a negotiation and maybe just not negotiate because she doesn't value money as much as a man does, maybe, or the prestige, or doesn't have to be like, oh, no, but I am worth more, because maybe she doesn't need that to validate who she is.
Yeah, or maybe
so that's also an aspect. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, maybe. I think what's really interesting how you're saying about sort of these learned behaviors. When I knew I was coming onto this podcast, you start kind of like evaluating yourself and evaluating your own sort of behaviors. And I know for me, whenever I've been in relationships and I've not been the bigger earner, it's never felt right. It's never sat right with me, because I'm like, well, I'm the man and I should be the provider, and I should be the one that's the bringing home the bacon, as it were. And it's interesting that there's this kind of need to be the provider. I mean, especially when I knew about Rafi, and Rafi was born, it was like a switch. It was like, I have to just make all the money in the world. I have to be a millionaire, and I have to be a millionaire tomorrow. And if I'm not, I'm an absolute failure as a father. There's that kind of innate switch, and that's not particular to me. A lot of men that I spoke with, especially men that are freelance or in business, and then their situation changes and they're about to be a father, there's this almost blind panic where they have to make money, they have to and I actually became really obsessed with it for a while, to the point, and I don't mind admitting this, to the point I actually went to see a therapist and had some real issues around finance and anxieties around money that I had to sort of sort out for myself. And so I don't know whether that part is biological or that part is a learned behavior, because I know growing up, my dad was quite a traditional man. He's a Sicilian background, and it's very much the father is the keeper and the holder of the house, but I didn't know, actually, for quite a significant part of my probably my teenage kind of years, my mum was actually the main provider, and I didn't know that. And it was always an assumption, well, my dad is the main provider. And then when I look back at it, of course, like, my mum was the main provider. She was lecturing at a university level, and my dad at that time had decided to step back and get an easier job. He was made redundant, and so he got an easier job. And when you look at it as an adult, it's like, well, of course, mum was earning way more than he was. But it was that assumption that I'd always grown up with, that the man has to be the provider, and that's not the case. I mean, we've sort of been forced into that situation now after having a child, because it would cost us as a household a lot more for me to go part-time than it did for my partner to go part-time. So it was more of a financial sense, and there was the financial reasons, but also my partner did very, very much make the decision that she wanted to be the primary caregiver, and so it was lucky that kind of worked
coincided
out.
And my feelings as well, as I wanted to be the provider, and being someone that runs a business is a lot easier to actually generate more income, whereas if you're working for PAYE, that's you get what you get no matter how hard you work.
It's
in
true.
most cases. So there's I think there's like a maybe it's like a blend of both, or maybe it's completely one or the other, but there's definitely some parts where we're very much taught about our roles in a family, as it were. I think anyway.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think it's very interesting. And like, I've had this discussion a lot of times with a lot of different people, and I think at the end of the day, what matters, as in any relationship, you communicate with your partner and you figure out a way, and as long as it works for you, nobody else has the right to have an opinion.
Exactly.
Like, that's the thing. It's really interesting to see how these kind of taught beliefs influence us on a really deep level. And just becoming aware of that is I think it's really interesting. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think with your dad also, it's a lot about perception. As a child, obviously, you don't know what's going on. You don't know how big salaries are or are not, or, what people are actually doing for work, And I think it's a lot about the perception that is there, not only of, the perception of you, son towards his father, but also maybe your friends or close family and what their parents are doing and what is going on there. And I definitely think that it's something that, well, is still, we're still in a patriarchy. So I think it's just apparent from that, and it's learned behavior, I think, in my opinion. And I think it's great that you guys have put the question to yourselves and said, okay, so your wife said, I want to be the caregiver. And it's not that it was always going to be her because she's the woman, So I think it's very healthy to have that balance of, okay, let's talk about this and let's see what is going on in our lives, because obviously you have a very successful independent business of your own, and you can't just do that for half the time only. You can't. That's not how that works. People who own a business will know what I mean.
Yeah. It's kind of it's a child in itself.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. Talking about that though, what exactly, like, can you explain to us what you do on a daily basis? Like, what?
Yeah, so I mean, it's changed quite a lot recently, actually. So for the last kind of 3 years, so this whole business was started out of pure desperation. I finished Mike's, as most businesses do, which is not the best way to start a business. I've since learned, but it worked. So thank goodness for that. But I finished at Mike's, and I'd kind of spent nearly 4 years there, and I thought, right, I've learned as much as I'm going to learn here. And I got offered a contract to produce an album, and I'd been an engineer up to then, but I'd always been interested in being a producer, and I'd done a few bits and pieces sort of on the weekends and after work, and so I got this contract through, and at the time as well, I got a contract to consult in the live industry, and so I thought, best time. Left Mike's, did the album. That was no problem. That kind of every album has their story, but it was done and it was fine, and it all got finished off. We went to Abbey Roads to finish it all off, and I was really chuffed about that. That was really good fun. And so that was done. I'd been paid up for that. I was utterly useless in the live industry consulting. Live isn't my bag. It's not something I've done a lot of. It's not something I've worked in. It was another one of those situations where I said, yeah, I'll do that. And the world came crashing down around me. So I ended that year with no job whatsoever, and I'd finished being paid for the album, and I had nothing going on whatsoever in terms of recording work. So I'd never actually learned to kind of sell myself as a producer, but I had this website, and it was an old blog called Studio Chimp, and I thought, let's see if I can get some mixing work through that. So I did that, and luckily through a mutual contact, I heard about a studio that was opening its doors and looking for another engineer. So I messaged them and I said, get me in. And it was a 2-hour drive to get to the studio. The pay was absolutely rubbish, but I took the job because it just meant I could stay in the studio whilst I was building up the Studio Chimp side of things. And the Studio Chimp was literally a name I come up with as a blog, you know. So I never meant it to be a recording studio. I said, like, people started calling me the Studio Chimp, and I was like, I don't know if I 100% like that. It's a bit odd, but you know, once the name's stuck, and you can't really get out of that. So that's fine. That is what it is. But so I was working from this studio and still freelance, and then I found out I could bring my own clients into the studio. So I started doing that and working from people from what at the time was just my laptop and a small pair of tannoys, just doing some mixes and bits. And I sort of just build it up from there day by day. So I'm very much a music producer. I've luckily enough to just have a career working with loads of great musicians, working on their music. And working with them to help them develop their careers. Now, over through that, I got to working with a company called Maz Records, which is patroned and set up by Robert Plant. And so I was working with them to mentor young artists into entering the music industry. And that sort of got me thinking about the mentoring side and you know, coaching artists. And the feedback was always that I was like fairly good at that. And so that I've kind of been veering a little bit more to doing that with a few people. And then I started working with another artist about a year ago. We've developed nearly an album's worth of work, and we managed to strike a deal where I could work with her full time. And so I'm managing, running, and consulting her entire career, and working with her on the music, and getting the whole team around her ready to launch hopefully later this year if all the ducks are lined up. So that's what I'm doing now, and that's a complete change. That literally happened maybe 2 months ago.
Yeah, it sounds very full on.
Wow, yeah.
It is very full on. Yeah, life is quite hectic, but you know, life has always been. When I was working at the studios, I was doing a 2-hour journey to the studio, and then it was 12 hours working there, 2 hours back.
Wow.
So you know, it was a 16-hour round day, and I was doing that 2 or 3 times a week, coming to my studio, do my 8-hour day, go and have some dinner, put Rafi down to bed, come back in here, spend another 3 or 4 hours mixing, you know. So it's been pretty full on for the last 3 years. So actually in some ways it's calmed down because the hours are less, but the work is a bit more intense.
Yeah. What were you saying with live? That you're rubbish at live. What do you mean? Is that like the live circuit of producing or like doing live shows or something?
Yeah. So we were looking to put on some festivals, and I just bit off far more than I could chew. And you know, and you know, I went in there a little bit naive, a little bit wet behind the ears, and I was kind of expecting a team that wasn't apparent, and so I was doing the job of about 20-30 people.
I think that's life for you.
Yeah,
crazy.
No, I got that, but also, you know, I was completely out of my depth with that one. And another really good lesson I learned with that was to just be honest, because I went into a board meeting with everyone there, held my hands up, and I said, if we carry on with these festivals, we're going to lose hundreds of thousands of pounds.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Okay.
And I said, so I'm advising you now to fire me. I'll help you clean up the mess. We'll salvage what we can. But this needs to not go ahead. And you know what? I was expecting the worst, but the CEO turned around to me and he shook my hand and he said, do you know what? You know, incompetence is seeing something going wrong and burying your head in the sand. And so I appreciated that. He said the door's wide open. I'm not sure it is. I'm really not sure it is. But it was a big life lesson. You know, stick to your path, stick to what you know, stick to where your expertise are.
Yeah, because that's interesting. I thought, because you said earlier when you went into that studio and you were like, oh, I didn't even know how to turn some of these things on. And you said yes, and you did it, and you obviously did great. But then in live, you also said, oh, yes, let's do this. And then it fell apart around you, like you said before. And it's just, I wanted to know how did you deal with that? How like at the time, was it like a huge thing? Or I mean, I expect it was, but
yeah, it was very stressful. Watching that all happen, it was very. Do you know what though?
Sorry, go ahead.
Say. Well, I think as long as you're acting with integrity and you're doing your best, you know, one of the things when I was working with Mike, he was a very hot-headed guy. I'm sure he wouldn't mind me saying that. You know, he's an 80s producer, you know, so very shouty, very and we'd get into arguments and it would be a very hostile environment to work in sometimes. But something he always said is like, you know, we're all in here to make a great record. That's why we're all here. And so I think what I took from that is like, if everyone in the room has integrity and is trying their best to do the right thing, and even if at that point the right thing was to turn around and say, look, this is failing, we've got to stop.
Yeah.
I think if everyone acts with integrity, okay, at the time it was stressful, but I think you can come out with it with your head held high and at least, you know, I think
more people should do that. More people should turn around and say, okay, look, I fucked up. Let's change this out, or, you know, do something. I think that would help a lot in a lot of cases. Yeah.
Well, I think as long as you don't hide it, like, you know, the problems come when you try to hide where everything's going wrong. And the reality is if you've got good people around you, you might get a bollocking, you might get shouted at, but, you know, whatever, you know, it's what are they going to do? They're not going to hit you. So you know, at least they shouldn't.
Let's hope not.
You know, let's hope not. Yeah, I
also, I think it helps a lot with being able to deal with it on your own, like for yourself, just being like, well, you know, I acted in a way that I feel okay with, or I don't feel ashamed of, and I'm you know, I was, like you said, with integrity. And I think that helps a lot with dealing with it afterwards. If you go into something and you're just like lying your way through it and it all falls apart, and then afterwards, I don't know how I would live with myself after that, honestly.
Yeah. Exactly.
So yeah,
it's definitely yeah, as I say, I think everyone's just got to act with integrity, keep themselves honest. Yeah, I think not much more.
And you were talking about this female artist that you're working with right now.
Yes.
I wanted to ask you if you would say you've worked with both genders equally, or even maybe gender fluid people. Is there a visible balance difference between men and women that you've worked with?
Do you know, I couldn't even tell you. I've worked with so many bloody people over the last few years. I think because of the work with Maz and through the studio, we get a lot of bands, we got a lot of artists. What I have tended to notice is I've worked, if I only look at the bands, it's pretty much exclusively men. And if I look at solo artists, it's probably 60% women, 40% men.
Interesting.
So mostly men in general, but when it comes to solo artists, more women for sure. From my point of view, kind of working with Eva, I'm not sure I've personally found much of a difference, except maybe it takes me a little bit longer to be more comfortable with women than it does with men. One of the things that kind of struck me with the Me Too movement was the kind of the thing where it's not every woman, but not every man, but every woman, and I thought that's a great way to describe it, because as a man, you know, I've never, or at least never intended to act towards a woman in a sexually aggressive way, in any kind of way. And you know, if I think about my friendship circle, I couldn't imagine any of my male friends doing that, or at least, you know, they certainly wouldn't admit to it if they did. And so you start going, well, you know, what's the thing here? Like, I certainly wouldn't act that way, and I don't think any of my friends would act that way. And then you start hearing, who is it? Who is that man?
Who is it?
Where is he? But but when you start hearing the stories, from simple things to being groped at when you're out, or right up to really kind of horrific things that you just wouldn't wish upon anyone, and you start to see how broad a problem that is, and I think that education has just made me sort of more aware when I'm working with a female artist for the first time, and just kind of being aware, like, you're a man in a situation where you have like a I use the word power position loosely. I always like to think that even though I'm the producer and I'm sitting in the chair and I control the mouse, it's a collaboration. We're working together to create the record. But in all respects, I'm the one that sits there at the desk and kind of goes, right, do this, and gets the party going. So there is a power position.
Yeah, and it's your place, and you're alone in your studio with this woman. So there is. I totally get that. Yeah.
So you are very aware of this, and certainly when I'm working with people for the first time, I don't know if it's noticeable. I don't know if anything, but I'm certainly on guard. It not because of them, but because of me. I'm just like, right, I need them to feel comfortable for a lot of reasons, because that's the producer's job, is to make people feel comfortable around you. You have to learn how to do that very, very quickly. And I don't want them to be afraid of me in any kind of way. I mean, I say this as a 5'3", man, and I'm not an aggressive. I don't think I come across as aggressive, or particularly even that demonstrative, or even I can be a bit of a wallflower, and I'm more of an observer. So I don't think I come across like that. But you do become very aware of how you act around women, whereas with men, I never feel that. It's
the pressure's off.
If anything, it's like a dick swinging show. It's like, if anything, you're kind of trying to put them in their place and go, look, mate, you hired me. So
there you go.
Yeah,
that's really interesting.
It is interesting.
No, it's like checking your own behavior, like just kind of like a thing that you're doing yourself, which is really cool. Checking your own behavior, but it does at some point, you can get quite anxious, because it does build up pressure, and it does kind of make you feel like, oh God, do I have to be aware of this now? Do I have to be you get more aware of yourself and your body, and you're just kind of anything you do. So that's really interesting. Yeah. Now, I was just going to bring it back to the kind of the not all men thing, because I just saw an Instagram post about the abortion laws in the USA, and it said one woman could sleep with 100 men within term and still only carry one baby to full term, right? And one man could sleep with 100 women and father off 100 babies, basically. And that's kind of like the what you were saying, like, oh, I don't know anybody in my group and stuff. And that's the thing, it doesn't have to be in your group of people. It just takes one.
Yeah.
And I think that brought it across a lot as well. The kind of, he could father 100 women, which means he could also assault 100 women and therefore cause all these stories. And that's why a lot of people are like, oh, yes, it's not all men, but you still are wary because you don't know which one it is.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
I just thought that was a really kind of cool comparison. So, yeah, it's really interesting.
I just wanted to say I've worked with Matt and he's super kind.
Oh, thank you.
I felt super comfortable, and I'm looking forward to working with you again sometime. So absolutely,
Oh, great.
I highly recommend Highly recommend.
I think yeah, it's a really interesting point about, you know, the one person affecting a lot of people, and I think this is potentially why women have struggled to be believed sometimes, because
Yes, good point.
hopefully the majority of men would go, well, I would never do that. I can't imagine any man doing that. No one, we hope that that's the situation. I don't know. I'm only one man in a world full of a lot of them. So so we do hope that no one will do that. And so when someone accuses a man of doing XYZ, there may have been, and again, I'm not a woman in that situation, I don't know, and I'm not an expert in this field, but it might be a reason as to why women might not be believed. And it might also be a reason as to why there's so much victim blaming. It's, oh, well, you shouldn't have worn that skirt, or you shouldn't have drunk that, you shouldn't have done that. Because a man goes, well, the only reason I would ever do that is if I felt like I was being led on. And it's like, well, actually, for the people that do this, there is no leading on. And even if there is no leading on, there's no consent, and I think, maybe that's why women have struggled to be believed, or maybe there's a certain element of misogyny throughout society. I wanted to tell this kind of really quick example because we were talking about how we learn things as children, and we grow up with these kind of ideas just based on our own parents. So I grew up thinking that women didn't drive, and it was a very bizarre thing to see women driving. And the reason that was my mum was blind, so she never drove. And so in my head, men drive, the dad drives, but the mother doesn't drive. And that's only because that was what was normal to me. Like, the idea of my mum driving is just wouldn't happen, So and so growing up, it kind of, when I started, even if I was like in my friend's car and it was their mum driving, it would be like, oh, but this is weird. Like, this is not, it's not normal for a woman to drive, and women don't drive. And, and that was completely something that I just grew up believing based on the experiences that I had.
Yeah. That's super interesting. And I just to come back to your theory about why sometimes women might not be believed, I think that's super interesting. That is a point of view that we haven't heard yet.
Well, I mean,
there might be something in that.
Speaking out loud, I'm not, there might be, there might not be. It might be the case for a couple of people or a faction of them, and then the other bit is, a certain level of bigoted beliefs or misogyny, or I don't know. I think it's such a grey area with so many multifaceted reasons as to why things end up the way that they are. But I'm hoping, certainly for me, the whole Me Too movement was an eye opener, just to hear the stories of some of my friends and family and just be like, wow, I didn't even know that happened. And just knowing that happens makes you maybe more vigilant about it. If you see it, I mean, I don't go out, so I don't see it. But, if you do see it, I'd like to hope that if I was in a situation and I saw it, I would stop it, or, at least make an attempt to kind of help. I guess one situation I do remember was being out in a club when I was very, very young. And I was out with a group of friends, and one of my female friends, she was being bothered like by this guy who kept kind of coming up to her, and I clocked it, and I just went and danced with her, and and watched him kind of.
We've all been saved that way.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Matt.
Yeah, thank you.
It's just something when you kind of like think back, and you think back to this Me Too movement, and it's amazing how many women say, oh yeah, no, totally been in that situation where the guy just won't go away, and you're hoping one of your male friends clocks it and comes and comes to the rescue, and it should just never happen. It should just never be the case. But
I was actually talking to a friend of mine just 2 days ago, not even 2 days ago, and she works at a bar, and she still, even though like she had a boyfriend for a while and now she's not got a boyfriend anymore, and she still tells people at the bar who flirt with her or want her phone number, she still just says, I have a boyfriend. Because if she just says no, it's A, they won't take no for an answer, and B, if they do say, and if she keeps saying, no, I just don't want to give you my phone number, they're going to be like, oh, why are you such a bitch? And, blah, blah, and just start insulting her because she doesn't want anything to do with them.
Yeah.
yeah,
It's easier to say that you have a boyfriend.
Yeah.
It is. And even if you're not out with male friends and you have that guy that just won't quit, I've even turned to a stranger.
Other guy.
Yeah,
Yes.
just a stranger, but
Any
like
other guy will do.
who's like normal, and then you just say, hey, and then you just and then the other guy goes away, and it's,
you hope that you don't have that other guy on you for the rest of the night because
Exactly.
he's like, oh, I saved you now. I need to.
Oh, also.
I have. Oh,
that's happened to me whilst being out. Like someone, perhaps like, because I'm so short, I feel like I'm not a threat. So, but I've certainly had like, someone turn around to me and just like, oh, hey. And, it's like, it's a woman. And
Really?
I'm sitting there going, I have no idea what's going on here.
Oh.
And, they're chatting away and I'm chatting away a bit awkwardly. And then, they clock the person leaving and they go, thanks. That was blah, blah, blah. And you go, oh,
Yeah.
right. Okay.
You
well,
see?
It's
happened twice.
well, it's like sometimes you'll see in a bar, like, a sign, or things you could order, or there's that universal
Ask
symbol.
Angela.
Oh, is that what it is? Okay. So
I think in the UK it's Ask Angela.
Right. Okay.
Or ask for Angela.
Yeah. And the fact that has to exist, is kind of scary. And I don't know what that is. It's silly things like I like Reddit, and there's this thing on there, Nice Guys Forum. And it's basically women, and they take screenshots of conversations that they've had with men who have approached them randomly, or sometimes it might be like a Tinder thing or something. And it ends up that, the men are a bit creepy or a bit weird, and they end up just going like, no, or just kind of saying no thanks or whatever. And then it's like the tirade of abuse that comes afterwards.
After that. Oh my God.
I don't understand it. And we've all been there. We've all been rejected by women, and especially when I had to,
or men,
or men. Yeah, yeah. But like as a guy, it's like if you get rejected by someone, I don't know, like how much of your entire self was relied on this person accepting you as their partner. It's a bizarre sort of overreaction, and you've got to wonder where that comes from. I think I saw it on one of your podcasts, and it reminds me of these kind of conversations that you see so often on these forums, and it's, I don't want to sleep with you. You are a whore. And it's like that doesn't equate. Like,
yeah, that doesn't even make sense.
It doesn't. Yeah.
I love it when they say, I don't want to sleep with you, and then all of a sudden you're a whore. I know, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense whatsoever.
Not in the
But
slightest.
it is very refreshing or heartening to hear you say you don't know what the fuck is going on either. It means that they're not normal.
No,
Yeah.
they're really not. And in fact, like if anything, as a guy representing men on this podcast, I'd like to say on behalf of all men, we're really sorry for those people. Like, they do not represent us. Like, at least I hope they don't represent us. It just seems that, it's one of those things, isn't it? When every woman, for the most part, certainly the vast majority, when every woman's experienced, either sexual aggression or some kind of sexual assault, or even being groped whilst you're out, or anything, like it's not hard then to understand that there would be this at least some level of wariness when it comes to meeting a new man for any situation, whether it's you're working in the same office, or you're meeting for a date, or you're just kind of part of the same friendship circle, or it's and I think as guys, we just have to accept that and kind of roll with it and just be like, well, look, it's you never want someone's first impression of you or someone to be wary around you, but you kind of just have to accept that they when you're working with someone new, they might be, and it's
because of their past experiences.
On you.
It's them.
It's not a reflection on you. That's the thing that a lot of people also fail to understand. The way women act around men a lot of the time, if they're wary and if they're if they don't feel safe, it's not a reflection on you personally. It's a reflection on all the men who have come before. So
but it's that same sort of argument when you talk about male privilege and the whole privilege kind of dispute comes up, and it's like no one is saying that you personally are more privileged than everyone else, like in this category of person. It's like, no, that's it's not the case. No one is pointing the blame at you and not saying that you are personally more privileged. It's just that your life experiences have made certain things easier than someone else who's gone through the same route, but was born a different gender or a different color or a different whatever. It's it's I think people are very quick to take it as a personal vendetta against them as a person, or even like people who kind of anti-feminist because they take it as a personal vendetta against men. And it's there might be a small faction of women who kill all men. It's like, but that again, that's like that would be the equivalent of everyone thinking that every single man is a rapist. Like, it's just not the case. There's just there's crazies everywhere, so you've got to navigate that.
But for the vast, we have our crazies too.
But it's, as you say, it's not taking it personally and just kind of as a guy, you've got to kind of remember, it's like you've never been a woman, so you can't expect to understand how they've traversed through life, and you can't expect to understand why they may feel that some things have been easier for you, and it's like with someone who's gone through some kind of harassment, sexual or otherwise, or worse. The starting point should just be, well, let's believe that that's happened. Like, if women are saying en masse, it's harder for women to get into certain careers or go through certain kind of ways. Well, if everyone's saying this en masse, let's go from the starting point at least of going, well, let's believe them and let's see where this can be improved, and how we can make this better. Because, from my point of view, like we're missing out on half the world of talent. It's if we're stopping, from my industry point of view, if we're stopping, purposely or not purposely, or whatever the situation is, if we're stopping women and people who identify as women and people who identify as females coming into the industry for whatever reason, we're stopping some very talented people, and that more talent coming into the industry can only benefit everyone, for sure.
Absolutely.
On that note, I guess that's all for today. We should wrap this one up. So thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode of Unboxing Women, and thank you, Matt, for coming on our show. We've had an absolute blast. It was very deep talk, but really interesting to hear your perspective on things. So thank you.
No, thank you for inviting me. I've had fun.
If you want to connect with Matt, be sure to check out his socials, which you can find in the show notes below. And if you've ever had an experience you'd like to share with us, send us a DM or tag us in your post with the hashtag #suchabitch. And don't forget to support your favourite artist through merch or donations. My name is Maika Rose. I've been chatting with Rexx and Matt Parisi. This is a weekly show, so make sure to tune back in next week. Same time, same place. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you soon. Bye.
Bye.